Hello. Today we're going to talk about the Cold War. There's a couple things that I want to talk about how World War II ended before we really get into how the Cold War is starting. So, World War II, remember, World War II, right, ends in 1945. It ends with Germany, Hitler commits suicide, and then shortly after, the rest of the leaders just kind of call it quits, and they're like, hey, we don't really have anything else to fight for. Also, we're out of money, so we're going to go ahead and be done. And then the war in Japan, the United States, we dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan in hopes that they would surrender. They didn't after the first bomb, which is why we then dropped the second bomb. After that, they were like, yeah, okay, cool, we'll surrender. There was a lot of kind of back and forth about what sort of surrender Japan wanted to do. Because remember, in Japanese culture, it's a lot more honorable to die in battle than it is to be taken prisoner or to surrender. So there's a lot of internal debate about how much surrender they wanted to do and how much power they wanted to give the United States over them. That eventually all happened. They signed the surrender agreement on the USS Missouri, and that was it. Okay, the war was over in August of 1945, and then the Cold War starts. You can make the argument that that the Cold War starts the next day. Like, we dropped the second bomb, Japan agreed to surrender, they signed the surrender agreement, and then the Cold War started. Okay, technically for our purposes, like 1946 to 1990. However, you can also make a strong argument that the Cold War is still happening today. So we'll do a quick kind of review, or not a review, sorry, but a quick intro into how the war actually starts, who's fighting it, what it looks like, what kind of war it is, and then later we'll be going into some more detail about what specifically happened. Okay, so first is this idea of what actually is a Cold War, right? Wars typically have a name associated to them that has to do with like where the war was fought or who's fighting the war or the purpose of the war, right? We have the American Revolutionary War. It's America fighting a revolution for independence. We have the 7 Years' War, which is a war that lasted 7 years. We have the World Wars, right? A war that takes over the whole world. So then what the heck is this idea of a Cold War? Okay, this term Cold War, it does not mean that the war was fought in winter. Okay, obviously, yes, winter happened because it's a 40-year war, but it's not like a Cold War because we're only fighting it in the snow, right? That's not what's happening. The reason we call it a Cold War is because there's no actual fight between the main countries. Okay, the 2 main countries participating in the Cold War are the United States and the Soviet Union. Okay, the United States and the Soviet Union, we never actually fight each other. Okay, in the whole like 40, 45 years of the war, we don't fight them. We don't like them, but we don't fight them, which is why we call it a Cold War, because technically it's all talk. We talk about the fact that we don't like each other. We threaten each other, but we never actually do anything about it. Okay, so that's why it's called a Cold War. So, these notes here, right, we're talking about post-World War II. So like I said, Soviet Union and the United States were the 2 countries that are participating in this Cold War. The reason that it starts largely is because of the way that World War II ended. World War II ended, and it was like a lot of bitterness and a lot of like residual anger going on between a lot of European countries. So first is this non-aggression pact, and if you remember, the non-aggression pact is between Germany and Russia about Poland. Remember, they both agreed, hey, we both want Poland, but we don't want to fight a war, so let's just agree that we're not going to fight each other. We're just going to split Poland in half, and we'll call it a day. And that worked for a little bit until Germany declared war on Russia. So Russia at the end of World War II is like upset because they're like, well, Germany, you promised that you weren't going to invade us, and then you did, and then you took over all of Poland, and we signed this agreement, and you basically like threw that agreement in the trash, and that's not cool. We want to really punish Germany for what they did to us. So Russia is really bitter. Okay, and then also how long the war took. The war takes 6-ish years, 5.5, 6 years. And the Allies, being like United States and England, and France, they're blamed for the length of the war. Largely, the United States is blamed for the length of the war, because just like in World War I, we didn't really want anything to do with it. We're like, this is not my problem. This is a European thing. I don't want to be a part of it. I'm going to hang out over here. And then the rest of Europe is like, well, United States, if you had just joined the war earlier, then this all could have been avoided. A lot of people wouldn't be dead. The war wouldn't have taken 6 years. This is all your fault. So people blamed the United States for the fact that the war lasted as long as it did because we didn't participate. And had we participated, it would have ended a lot sooner. Okay, so Russia's bitter at Germany. The rest of Europe is bitter at us. And everybody's just kind of like angry. Second thing, the Yalta Conference. The Yalta Conference, similar to the Treaty of Versailles in World War I, this is what we did after the war to figure out like who to punish and what we should do. So first thing we do is we divide Germany into zones. So let me draw some pictures here. I'll add a little page here so that you can see. I'll come back to this, don't worry. Okay, so let's call this Germany. Okay, Germany, just like in World War I, Germany gets blamed for World War II. Okay, so if you imagine we're in class and there's like 4 really rambunctious kids, right? Teachers often separate those 4 kids so that they don't cause a lot of problems. So that's what we do to Germany. And we're like, hey, Germany, we're going to split you up into 4 sections. Okay, Russia gets one. The United States gets one. England gets one. France gets one. And we're like, hey, Germany, we're going to split you up. Russia, you're going to be able to do whatever the heck you want to over here. The United States can do what they want over here. England can do what they want. France can do what they want. And we basically split it into 4 countries, right? We split it up. If it's all separated, it can't cause any more problems, and everything will be fine. Everything was, in fact, not fine. What ended up happening, France, England, and the United States, right? We are all for C. Okay, so really like these 3 sections end up joining together, and it becomes Western Germany. And then this part with Russia over here becomes Eastern Germany. Okay? There's one little problem with this. The capital of Germany is Berlin. Berlin happens to be in the Russian section. Russia wants to make Germany a socialist country and a communist country. And that's like the opposite of democracy. So these 3, France, England, and the United States, they start to panic. And they're like, well, we don't want the capital to fall to communism, because if the capital falls to communism, then pretty soon the rest of the country is going to fall to communism. And that's not good. So within Berlin, okay, let's pretend this is Berlin. Within Berlin, we cut the country in half, or sorry, the city, okay? And the eastern half becomes a communist half, and the western half is a democratic half. This is the Berlin Wall. Okay, it splits the city of Berlin in half. It allows a little tiny pocket of democracy within this overall like communist section to like calm everybody else down. Okay, so we split Germany up and then we split Berlin up as well. Germany as like a, hey, sorry, Russia, this is the United Socialist Soviet Republic, it's the Soviet Union. They're like, hey, sorry for breaking the non-aggression pact. Here's a bunch of money. Great. The Soviet Union then is like, yeah, we're a communist country, but we'll let the rest of Europe be a democracy and we'll be fine with that. Spoiler alert, they don't. Okay. And then lastly, the United Nations. After World War I, remember the League of Nations is created. The League of Nations was like that alliance to end all alliances, and they're like, if we ever have any problems, we'll just talk about our feelings and everything will be fine. It didn't work, obviously, because World War II happened, like 20 years after the League of Nations was created, so it was a huge failure. So the United Nations is then our second attempt at that, in an effort to like protect people against aggression and make sure that there's no more war. It still exists. It functions a lot better than the League of Nations. Just as a FYI. Okay. So, in my beautiful picture, I'm an artist. All right. So, in terms of the aims and the purpose of the war, I split it up into 4 sections, looking at like their main goals. So we'll look at the United States first because we have a better understanding of that one because we live here. Okay. So first is this idea of democracy versus communism. We as the United States, we have a democratic government. Okay, we're a democracy, meaning people get to vote. They vote for representatives. Representatives then vote at the higher level. Yay, democracy. Okay, we don't want communism. Remember communism? We played that game where you play rock, paper, scissors. I think we played that game. I don't really remember. It was a long time ago. Communism is when everybody shares in everything equally. So if I work really hard and I earn $30 an hour and I have 30 friends that sit on their butt all day and don't do anything, in a communist country, my $30 would get split up between all of us and we would all end up with $1. Everybody else did nothing, but because we're all about equality, everybody gets the money that I worked for. Which is great for the people that sit on their butt and don't do anything, not as great for the people that are working really hard. Okay, so we want democracy to be in all of these countries post World War II. Part of the reason is because we think it's best. Another part of the reason is that if we have a bunch of other countries that are democracies, that means we have a bunch of friends. Typically, you hang out with people who think like you. So if we create a bunch of democratic governments in Europe, we then have a lot of friends in Europe, which helps us become a super world power. Okay. Secondly, industry and raw material. If you think back to the Industrial Revolution, industry is still happening. People are still having factories. That's all happening. And we're all about spreading that. And we're all about this idea of globalization. And like, if my country is really good at growing cotton, great. I'm going to specialize in that. And I'm going to grow a lot of cotton to then sell to your country who's really good at making t-shirts, right? And we're going to all work cohesively in order to create booming industries, which then means that everybody's going to end up with more money. Thirdly, stable governments that are a democracy, because again, if we have a bunch of democracies in Europe, that means they're friends. If they're friends with us, that means that they're new markets, meaning that we can sell stuff to them. And if we can sell stuff to them, we make money. And do we like that? Okay. And then lastly, we want to reunite Germany. We understand that for the time being, splitting them up into 4 sections is probably a good idea because they need to be on timeout for a little bit. But pretty soon, everything is going to be fine and they're going to get back together and all will be well. We don't want to keep them in 4 different corners. We want them to learn their lesson and go back together. Okay, those are our goals. The Soviet Union then are the complete opposite, right? Soviet Union is like, hey, all of you workers, you need to revolt and you need to overthrow your government because communism is best, which is the opposite of us, right? Yay, communism. They want to create a bunch of little baby communist countries. And they're willing to do that by whatever means possible, including a workers' revolt. Secondly, they want to keep the functioning economy in Eastern Europe, which is mostly in Russia. And they're like, yeah, if your country is really good at growing cotton, congratulations, you can have a bunch of cotton. We don't want it. Also, we're not going to buy it from you. We're not going to sell anything to you. And they don't want to spread their economy. They want to keep their economy in Eastern Europe. To build their economy, and they're like, if everybody else dies out because their economy fails, well, unfortunate for you, don't really care. Okay, and they're all about focusing on their part of the world. Thirdly, they want to protect their borders, and they're kind of like, all right, like, yeah, United States, we get it, you're powerful, but we don't want you here. If you want to hang out in England and France because that's what, your buddies, that's fine, but stay there. None of this like spreading democracy stuff. We don't want that. You can be democratic. That's cool, but like don't try to make my communist friends into your democratic friends. That's not how it works. You stay over on like your side of the campus. Don't come here. Okay? And then lastly, they're like, no, Germany has started the last 2 wars. If we want Germany to no longer fight a war, we have to keep them divided. We can't let them be reunified because they're just going to cause problems all over again. Okay, so those are the main goals. Like I said, they're the complete opposite. So if you can remember what the United States wanted to have happen, then you know what the Soviet Union wanted to have happen. Okay, also, I realized this a couple years ago, and it like blows my mind, right? The United States, we are the U.S. The Soviet Union, who thinks the complete opposite of us, is the Soviet Union, U.S., S.U., opposite. What crazy wordplay. I just found that interesting. All right. Iron Curtain, I'm going to kind of breeze through this idea of the Iron Curtain. If you've ever played bubble soccer or seen bubble soccer, right, there's a person that they're then inside a bubble. Right? There's another person inside a bubble. And when they run towards each other, their bodies don't collide, but the bubbles collide, right? It's their protection, and the other person will like bounce off and they go flying way over here. That's what the Soviet Union does to Europe. All of those little baby countries, the Latvias, the Lithuanias, the Bulgarias, all of the countries that existed post-World War I, the Soviet Union takes them and is like, hey guys, we'll totally protect you if you become a communist country. Okay? And they create this like buffer. If this is the Soviet Union, these then are bubble soccer ball are all of our little baby countries, right? We have our Latvia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, Romania, Czechoslovakia, all of those baby countries become this like buffer zone around it so that the United States and democracy can't get in here. It can maybe like take over this baby little country, like maybe Bulgaria becomes a democratic country, but that's fine because it's still not getting all the way back into the Soviet Union. Okay, so that's what the Iron Curtain is. Called the Iron Curtain, it's iron because it's super strong, but it's a curtain because it can move. Right? Right now, it's right here, initially, but then democracy moved in here, so now it kind of moves and it's over here. And that's fine. It can move a little bit. They didn't break through the curtain, they just kind of moved the curtain a little bit. Okay, and then lastly is this idea of containment. If nothing else from this section on the Cold War, you need to remember containment. Okay, containment is the idea, and this is the purpose of the Cold War. Containment is the idea that we as the United States, we're okay with other people being a communist country if they were already a communist country at the end of World War II. Okay, so the Soviet Union is already a communist country in 1945, and we're okay with that. We're fine with that. Like, more power to you. However, what we do not want to have happen in the Cold War is to have communism spread. We don't want it to ooze anywhere else. We want it to stay where it is. We're not trying to get rid of it. That's not the purpose. The purpose of the Cold War is not to get rid of communism. The purpose of the Cold War is to keep communism where it is. This is the purpose of the Cold War. Not to get rid of it, just to like put a lid on it, contain it where it is, keep it where it is, and not let it spread to any other country. Okay? That's containment. That's the Cold War. That's it. That's why we don't really fight the Soviet Union, because we're not trying to get rid of it. We're not trying to get rid of communism or make them another country, or sorry, another like political ideology. We're just trying to keep it there, which is why we talk about it. We're like, hey, don't let anybody else be communist. And they're like, fine, don't let anybody else be like a democracy. But we don't fight it. We just want to put a lid on it, keep it where it is, come back to it later. Okay? Last quick little bit. I'm actually not going to go into today. I changed my mind. I'm going to do this later. Okay? So we'll end with that. So containment, keep it where it is. These two policies, which I'll go in later, these are how we do it. Okay, how we contain communism. But Iron Curtain, right? It's our little buffer zone around the Soviet Union, so that containment, communism stays where it is. You want to be a communist? Great. You were a communist in August of 1945? Great. But that's it. Nobody knew. Okay? Yeah, that's it for our intro to the Cold War. Like I said, we'll go into a couple more details about what actually happened. There are a couple of battles, but not between the United States and Soviet Union. We never fight each other. We go on like house tours and we look at model kitchens together, but we don't actually fight a war. So that's that. Let me know if you have any questions, and we will be in contact soon.